Hello and welcome to Hooting Mandrills. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Sam.
And today we'll be recapping Tarkir Dragonstorm Face Commanders. We would usually include the special guests, but there are no new additions from special guests as the cards are from Ikoria, a set that's already in Arena.
Half the fetch lands also, if you need those for Timeless. I guess this is not a great way to get them because special guests appear in about 1% of draft packs.
It's also not always great to grab fetch lands in draft, but
they tend to be worse than gain lands in Limited, or at least they were in cons. There are 10 face commanders that will also be coming to Arena, will be legal in Historic and Timeless, and we're going to look at if any of them are any good there. Starting with Betor, Ancestor's Voice. This is the commander version of the Abzan Spirit Dragon. 2 and Abzan for a 3/5 flying lifelink. At the beginning of your end step, put a number of 1/1 counters on up to one other target creature you control equal to the amount of life you gained this turn. Return up to one target creature card with mana value less than or equal to the amount of life you lost this turn from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it's 5 mana, 5's a lot. There are a lot of cards you would play in Historic that are decent at gaining life, getting that trigger. There are a lot of things that even if you're playing this on 5, you might spend 0 mana, but 2, 3, if you do multiple of them, 4 or 5 life in the turn you put this down if that's what you want to be doing. It's not completely insane that this card would do something. Unfortunately, it's in an awkward place where you can't hit it off Coco. You could hit it off Birthing Ritual, but if you do, you'll hit it on your end step and won't get the trigger the turn it comes down, and that's pretty bad. It also has to compete in the sort of deck that would want it with something like Sorin Alenda, which is just a little bit too good.
Yeah, I was going to say that a large part of this card's problems are in its typing, even because as a dragon, you'd rather this card were an angel or maybe even a bat, just for synergies. Those cards, like those types of decks are so far from Historic playable that a 5-drop, that because most of these life gain counters things happen as you gain the life and cost 2 mana. So I don't know. Seems a little rough, but it's a cool card. I'm sure that the Brawl players will like it.
Yeah, I want to like it more than I do in Historic, honestly. I love playing 5-drop dragons, but this one just seems a little outmoded in Historic.
Yeah, and you also have to play black, which isn't super what you want to be doing in life gain typically, I would think.
Yeah, I guess. There have been Orzhov life manipulation decks. I play one in Timeless in various formats at various times, but cost is tough. Card's just a little bit too awkward at what it's trying to do. All right, here's another card that's also sort of more of a brawl card. Elsha, Threefold Master, 1 of each Jeskai color for a Jin Monk. Trample, Prowess, good keywords. Whenever Elsha deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 white monk creature tokens with Prowess. Sort of a spin on Monastery Mentor for the command zone, but unfortunately not for too much else.
Yeah, playing this card in a constructed format seems really rough. Monastery Mentor doesn't really see standard play. Yeah, even in the standard deck where Mentor was seeing play, he was kind of a sideboard card anyway, and not really even, Jin is better, and, just the Jeskai plan with the Prophetic Memory is really where people are mostly doing these days in standard. Not that this card is standard legal, but yeah, I think that this card would have a really tough time in Historic. It's cool.
Mentor's really good in Vintage, where you can go Black Lotus, Mentor, Mox, and have a bunch of Prowess cards that are going to trigger a bunch really early. And that's just not the case here.
I guess we do have a couple of Moxes now with Dragonstorm coming, but this isn't a dragon card, so
It is a legend, but Mentor isn't. Also, this thing has to hit them to trigger. Can't cast it off of Arena of Glory mana, or you can only use one of the two. It's just too awkward, unfortunately.
Yeah, these are keywords that I like, and I don't like this card at all. But oh well, let's move on.
Eshki, Temur's Roar. Another card this is going to be a consistent theme. It's just a little too commandery, too awkward to cast for what it's trying to do. Temur mana for a 2/2, so far so bad. Human Warrior. Whenever you cast a creature spell, put a 1/1 counter on Eshki. Okay, getting better. If that spell's power is 4 or greater, draw a card. Getting better. If that spell's power is 6 or greater, Eshki deals damage equal to Eshki's power to each opponent. There are things that work with this and trigger this, but unfortunately for Eshki, there isn't really a Temur deck to just slot her into. Green Devotion flashes white, usually in Historic, but splashing into Temur is pretty impossible for it.
Yeah, I mean, 2-color splashing is absurd, yeah.
Eshki herself does not turn on Fanatic of Ronus easily. It sounds fun to grow old together, perpetually make Hazoret Godseeker a 6/4 and trigger Eshki with it. It does not sound to me very good. Green Overlord, a little bit more of a standard thing. Just probably a very fun Brawl commander, just not going to get there in Historic, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it's also on cast, and a lot of times, which it has to be because of the draw triggers and the damage trigger, but, you know, a lot of creatures like this, the effect is enter. You know, there's like a 2-cost white creature with whenever a creature enters, it gets the 1/1, which is obviously the worst ability on Eshki, but this creature could start at 4/4, I think, for the Temur mana base, and really wouldn't be broken. I don't know about Commander. Maybe in Commander that would be broken, but I think that
everything's so big in Commander, though.
Yeah.
Like, if it were 4/4, it would be a quite good constructed card, I think. As a 2/2, I am not feeling it.
Yeah, I mean, it still has to compete in Historic, which the cards are quite a bit better than this typically.
Yes, it has to be about as good as Jarsoul to even be considered as
Jarsoul is barely
drop.
playable. I love Jarsoul, one of my favorite Historic cards, but barely. I mean, it is playable, but barely.
And Jarsoul's quite a bit better than Eshki here.
Is, yeah.
All right, next, Felothar the Steadfast. 4 mana, including Abzan for a 0/5, but each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. Creatures you control can attack as though they didn't have Defender, and for 3 mana, you can tap it and sack another creature to draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness, then discard cards equal to its power. So I am a fan of Butts as a archetype in Historic. I am a fan of blue in that archetype. Plagon, Fear of Change, and Tamio are pretty much the best cards in the deck. I like playing black cards, but I've never really liked the Assault Formation, High Alert part of that deck, so this is a little bit of a tough sell. Also, Fatal Push is weirdly bad in Historic these days because it doesn't interact very well with the blinky Overlord blinking and Sorin stuff, and sometimes doesn't interact with energy all that well because all their cards 2 for 1. But this card's okay, but I think it's not how I would want to build Butts, and I don't know if anyone else really wants to build Butts in Historic.
Right. Yeah, I mean, honestly, they could shave off that extra mana, keep all the same stats, and I don't think that this card would be broken.
Just make it Doran plus, yeah.
You know, but here we are complaining about Commander cards again that aren't playable and constructed, but
there are only like 6 more to go.
So we'll just keep the complaining ongoing, and we'll hopefully find a card we like at some point here.
Oh, yeah, the 2 Sultai ones are not like completely implausible as Historic cards. Kotis, Sibsig Champion, Sultai mana, Zombie Warrior 3/3. Once during each of your turns, you may cast a creature spell from your graveyard by exiling 3 other cards from your graveyard, in addition to paying its other costs. Sort of like an Osteomancer Adept effect, but it's not a tap ability, it's a once per turn. So theoretically, if you have the mana to cast whatever you're thinking of casting from your graveyard, you could do it the turn it comes down. You could maybe go, if you have a full enough graveyard, Kotis, Ornithopter out of the bin. Oh, and whenever 1 or more creatures you control enter, if 1 or more of them entered from a graveyard or was cast from a graveyard, put 2/1/1 counters on Kotis. So if you have on turn 3 ulti mana, an Ornithopter, and 3 other cards in your graveyard, you can play Kotis, escape the Ornithopter, and have a 5/5 and a 0/2. If your Ornithopter was in your graveyard because of Retrofitter Foundry, you maybe have a 5/5 and a 4/4 off of this. That sounds okay.
You can unearth him. He's 3 mana, and also he fits in decks with the card Psychic Frog, which is powerful.
That's true. There are reasons to make your graveyardy, rootsy decks blue. There is at least one very good reason from Modern Horizons 3. So if you're milling yourself and trying to do stuff, this is a card that you could kind of take seriously. It's not as exciting to unearth as... actually, if you unearth this guy, whenever 1 or more creatures you control enter, that should see itself. He should be a 5/5 when you unearth him. He's still not quite an Oculus, but he's not an Oculus.
Yeah.
Especially if you have mana to cast another spell.
A little awkward in conjunction with Oculus, as you do need to exile 9 cards from your graveyard in order to pay Oculus from your graveyard.
True.
With him.
He is taxing your graveyard, and Oculus is taxing your graveyard, so they have to compete against one another.
Ideally, you don't ever want to pay the 6 for Oculus, right? Sure. Like, you want to cheat out Oculus. But yeah, it just like makes it almost... I mean, you could easily have 9 cards in your graveyard with Malevolent Rumble and, you know, Overlord of the Baelmerk and even the Dredger's Insight. Like, there's plenty of ways to put cards in your graveyard.
If that's where you want him to be.
If you want him or other things to be there. So 9 cards in your graveyard is actually not that crazy. Sort of later game. I kind of like him. I mean, so far, this is the most playable card we've seen.
Yeah, I think the Sultai ones are definitely the best, definitely among the best of these as far as constructed playability. All right, here's one that is strictly basically not constructed playable. Neriv, Crackling Vanguard, 2 and Mardu for a 4/4 Flying Death Touch Dragon. When he enters, create 2 1/1 red goblins. So, you know, so far not the worst, but not good enough on its own, and it is on its own in constructed because whenever Neriv attacks, exile a number of cards from the top of your library equal to the number of differently named tokens you control. So far, so good. During any turn you attacked with a commander, you may play those cards. So I understand why they made it any turn you attacked with a commander. If you're playing this as your commander and they kill it, they want you to be able to play it again, attack with it, or they want you to not lose those cards that you worked to steal, or they're your library. So those cards you worked to impulse draw as a result of it getting killed, but it does mean that in constructed, it does actual nothing.
Unless you're playing Ketramos, you just need to get cards at your exile, but this is way too rough for that. Yeah, I mean, that's like literally the only example of that being even somewhat plausible, but yeah, never gonna work. No, you can't play Ketramos with this card. This card's too expensive, no good.
Ketramos also, it turns him into a real boy, but doesn't trigger when stuff is exiled off a deck.
Right, so you don't even get to draw and lose a life, yeah. So that's pretty bad.
It's a 4/4 Flying Death Touch that makes 2 1/1s. If these were in draft packs like the ones for MH3 were, this would probably be a pretty good limited rare just for that, but it's not going to be playable in constructed because you never attack with a commander in constructed. It's just not how it works.
It just doesn't work, yeah. And it also, the tokens don't come down on attack, just entry, so that's kind of bad.
All right, next is another one that I think might have an outside shot. Shiko and Narset unified. 1 and Jeskai for a 4/4 legendary creature, Human Spirit Dragon. It's a team-up card. Flying and Vigilance. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, Flurry, the keyword of the Jeskai in Dragonstorm, copy that spell if it targets a permanent or player, and you may choose new targets for the copy. If you don't copy a spell this way, draw a card. So I kinda like this. There's both a legend and a dragon, so it works with both of the Moxen, both Mox Jasper and Mox Amber, the 2 Moxen that are legal in Historic. So you could plausibly play this, play a Mox, draw a card, have a protection spell or something up. The only other legendary dragon for less than 4 mana that in Jeskai colors is Nadar. And me and Nadar...
There's a new one, too. There's a 3-cost white dragon in the new set, right?
Yeah, it turns off your Moxen and isn't a legend.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. just not playable.
There are other cheap dragons that you could consider, and you could maybe turn them into legends. Maybe you play Sprite Dragon, Mox Jasper, Birthday Escape, Mox Amber, and you have a legend. That sounds fun. I don't know if it's good, but it sounds fun.
I think the coolest part about this card's text, sorry, I might be tangenting, but is that it doesn't say targets only one. So a spell, as long as it targets a permanent or a player, you can copy it. It doesn't have to target just one. So that's like, it's kind of got the sort of similar to the ley line of resonance, but this doesn't have to target your things either. You can lightning bolt something and copy it, right, as well. And that, if you have no more creatures to kill, that can go face. And even if you lightning bolt them to the face, you can do it twice or whatever, So that's kind of interesting with the wording of the card.
Yeah, for sure. Copying spells is good. Drawing cards is good. This seems triggerable. I think you really need the Moxen to make this work. So you need to be playing like Sprite Dragon, maybe Fearsome Whelp, maybe Smoldering Egg to turn on Mox Jasper, and then probably you have to play like these Ring Tempts You cards that used to see some play and now are a little outmoded by the chorus cards to get that going. It sounds, as I talk about it, like it's more of a brew than something that would actually stick, but it's the sort of thing that I would have fun trying.
Yeah, it's cool. I don't know how powerful it would be to line up. Yeah, 4 mana is kind of ridiculous in your prowess deck. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be prowess, but what else are you doing, right?
I think it
dragon
can't,
slash prowess, I guess.
You sort of have to be... You have to be sort of a value deck rather than a prowess deck, I think.
Maybe it's just like you put this card in energy and you just just double up on your Galvanic Discharge, whatever it's called.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know what to do with this deck. It's a cool card. I like it a lot. But.
It's a cool card. It seems like a fun brew around that probably won't quite stick as a
historic
deck.
Playable, yeah.
But moving on, Teval, the Balance Scale. This is Commander Teval. Like the other Sultai Commander, I think this one's okay. 4 mana, including Sultai, for a 4/4 flying Spirit Dragon. Whenever Teval attacks, mill 3 cards. Then you may return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, create a 2/2 Black Zombie Druid creature token. So they keep giving me cards that I would like to play Slitherhead with, but can't. As we get to the main set, there will be another card like Ketramos that draws a card if you Slitherhead. There will be a card that makes Slitherhead actually mana positive. This card, if you could have a Slitherhead in your graveyard when it came down, it could be a 5/5 and a 2/2 for 4 mana, essentially. And you can also trigger it in other ways for free, like Ghost Vacuum. It's good in Rootsy style decks. It is sort of like Soul of Windgrace without an ETB, and Soul of Windgrace doesn't really see historic play, but it does enough stuff that I could buy it as a build around.
The other cool thing is you can just fetch Prismatic Vista. It doesn't have to be from the milled cards to return, which is sometimes a caveat we see in this kind of thing, which is kind of cool, like just
you can
freely add Prismatic Vista to your Sultai mana base and you can get it back every single time. Kind of cool.
If this thing lives, it's going to ramp you every time it attacks. Like, if it dies but makes a zombie or two, that's pretty reasonable also.
Yeah, and we always talk about, 4 mana is not too much for historic. It's doable, especially in these rampy colors. You've got really good things like Malevolent Rumble, help you get there.
Rumble helps you get there.
Dorks, whatever.
If you're playing a Roots deck, Roots starts producing a lot of mana if it gets going. Teval's cool.
Yeah, I could see Teval as being playable as well. Obviously, I don't know if there's any Sultai decks. Once again, you can play Psychic Frog in this deck, so we're in a good place when you can play Psychic Frog.
Yeah. Psychic Frog also triggers Teval.
You can leave things can leave your graveyard, easily with Psychic Frog's other, jump ability. So there's 3 2/2s, oh, one or more, so one 2/2, but still,
Things are going on here for sure. All right, next is Ureni of the Unwritten, a foreign Temur for a 7/7 flying trample. Whenever Ureni enters or attacks, look at the top 8 cards of your library. You may put a dragon creature card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. I have played more Minion of the Mighty in Historic than probably most people. This would be a pretty good thing.
Maybe anyone.
Maybe anyone, yeah. This would be a pretty good thing to cheat in off Minion. I kind of think it's worse than Ziatora, because if you have Minion scale up attack, put Ziatora in, and then fling the Minion, that's 18, which basically kills them in a shock format. Ureni's cool though, and if I were to try picking up that deck again, I might try it in some number as part of my dragon package. If Ziatora is not going to kill them, Ureni will often hit another dragon that maybe maybe finds you the Terror of Mount Velis to get double strike and kill them then, or just leaves a big dragon in play that they then have to deal with.
8's a lot of cards to look at.
Yeah, so I like this card if you're looking to cheat a dragon in specifically. I don't think it works in the other deck that you would think about in historically, not as much of a player now, that would try to cheat dragons in specifically is Dragonstorm. And I think Ureni does not work there because that deck is... Ureni doesn't really change that deck needing to be kind of a graveyard deck. So, you have to resolve Mizzix's Mastery to get back Dragonstorm to go, Terror, Bladewing, and then Legend Ruled, the Bladewing triggers, kills them. Ureni doesn't really help you combo kill with a storm count of only 2 from just the Mastery plus the Dragonstorm itself. And it doesn't really stop you from being graveyard reliant, because you still need to Mizzix's Mastery the Dragonstorm based on how that deck works. So it doesn't really give you a way to play around Leyline or anything like that. We do get Breaching Dragonstorm in the new set, which is a little expensive for Historic as a cheat stuff in card, but is kind of cute with Ureni. I don't know. It's a card to keep in your memory banks, I think, more than anything. It's a 7-drop that's of a power level with something like a Traxa or a Tali, if it needs to be a spirit or a dragon that you're cheating in.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't really foresee the dragons are free card, whatever that one's called, being a player. Dracogenesis, yeah. I don't see that could work with this, but I don't know. It's cool. I think it's a cool card. I love big dragons. It's obviously hard to play them.
I mean, another thing about this is if there ever is a combo that involves putting dragons into play, looking 8 deep is pretty far. And if this just finds another copy of itself, it is an ETB. You can just Legend Rule and go again until you find what you're actually looking for. I could see this card being a big thing to cheat in Historic at some point. That point just maybe isn't right now, is how I think about it.
Yeah. I mean, you're probably the person who would figure out how to play this card more than most. And yeah, I'm struggling to find a great way. But the 8 card deep, like we said, really powerful. So it's on entry and attack too, which you like to see.
Yeah, if you can just get to 7 mana, you can, with an Arena of Glory, you can just send it and get 2 dragons, probably. 2 is a lot of dragons, if they're free.
Yeah, yeah, I'd say that's pretty decent.
7 is a lot of mana, and again, the deck that produces that much mana is not in Temur currently, and probably doesn't want to be. I also hate that deck. It would be a disservice to Ureni here. All it was is a card for Green Devotion, but cool card.
Hard for Green Devotion to play enough dragons, right?
Oh, that's also true. All right, last I think this is the last one. Zurgo Stormrender, Mardu mana, legendary orc warrior 3/3, mobilize 1. And whenever a creature token you control leaves the battlefield, draw a card if it was attacking. Otherwise, each opponent loses 1 life. So there are, other mobilize cards, other cards that put a lot of disposable token crap into play. One of those cards is probably like too good for the format and is in a deck that is frequently in these colors. Unfortunately, that deck will not give up Lurrus of the Dream Den unless forced to, and so this card is probably a non-starter. Even if you were to go a Gigantha route in Mardu Energy, this card does not cast cleanly off Arena of Glory, which is kinda rough.
Every single time we do one of these commander card recaps, they print a really cool Mardu card that will never see play in Historic until you ban Lurrus. So all we're asking is that you ban Lurrus of the Dream Den like every other reasonable format in all of Magic. And
you have Timeless now for Lurrus to live in. That's an unreasonable format where Lurrus is appropriate.
That's fine. I mean, Lurrus can be in Timeless.
Again, like I said when we talked about bans last time, I like Lurrus a lot, actually. I like that style of gameplay. I don't salt that much over companions, but
it's just keeping these cool cards out of the format, I think that's mostly...
Keeps cool cards out of the format. It makes the format more hostile to brews, and companion is kind of a mistake. I almost think that they don't see it that way at Wizards. They see it as a tournament logistics problem, and they are like, okay, we'll ban them in the paper formats, but Arena, they're just fine. Or maybe they just don't think about these formats at all.
Yeah, maybe they just don't care that much about Historic, which is kind of what it seems to be. But I think the abilities are really cool too. Mobilize Mobilize 1 is only okay. Some of these 2-drops, the 2-drop 1/3 Voice of Victory. Yeah, 1/3 isn't great to attack with, but 2 tokens plus not being able to cast spells on your turn, if they don't have the blocks, they can't do anything about it, right? So yeah, I like Mobilize. I think that it's cool. I think that probably, we'll get to it, but Standard's definitely gonna see Mobilize in action, in my opinion.
Yeah, Voice Victory might be Historic playable. Zurgo, I don't think gets there, and
yeah, I think Voice of Victory
is kind of a hard sell, even if Lurrus were banned. But he would have more of a shot, and would certainly have a home where maybe he just wasn't good enough, instead of a home where he's definitely not good enough because he's Lurrus non-compliant.
I think it's likely that Voice of Victory could be Timeless, Vintage, Modern, Legacy. Name it.
Grand Arbiter.
This card's
Grand
good.
Arbiter is card
seen in a bunch of those formats already. And this one doesn't need
Grand
to...
Abolisher.
Grand Abolisher.
Grand Arbiter is something else. I don't remember what Grand Arbiter is,
but this doesn't need 2 white. It's just
that's
one,
also
one
true.
white,
it is
which
much
is
easier to cast.
Pretty big deal.
Yeah. Well, that's the face commanders for Tarkir Dragonstorm. Some of them might be Historic playable. They're certainly all Historic legal.
Why didn't they print any dragons in the special guest slot? Do we have Tiamat on Arena?
Yeah, Tiamat. Okay. Tiamat was AFR, Adventures in Forgotten Realms.
So maybe they don't need it for maybe all the dragons are on Arena. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that there are any cool old dragons that I feel like I'm missing. Murktide Regent would be a cool add to Arena, I guess. But they had the 5 ultimatums and the 5 which got cool art treatments, and 5 fetch lands, which are always good to get more of in circulation for modern players. So I get it.
Yeah, it's good. It's also good that you might be able to pack a couple if you're drafting a lot, or maybe grab a couple in drafts. We haven't been able to draft this set of fetch lands before, right? There has never been a set with these ones.
These are...
Because we've only had the Tarkir fetches.
Okay, I don't
before, right?
remember if these are the allied or enemy fetches. If they are the enemy ones...
No, it is. It's not the Tarkir ones, it's the other ones, I believe.
Marshflat's Verdant Catacombs and Friends have not been draftable on Arena yet.
So a 1% chance, but still, if you draft enough, you'll probably see a couple. There's a lot of packs open in drafts.
Might save you a few rare wildcards. All right, well, like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you for the set proper.